Dr. Kusari is not free, so I'm the one replacing him. Okay, so can you hear me well? Can okay, good. So let's see, we have how many people here? Madam Virus, Ilham, Siling, Suziana. I think it is 11, 12 already. So while waiting for that, I think we should start the session first. Then maybe after 2 presentation, then we take a photo, group photo, see how. Okay, see how. Okay or not, Mr. Aizazi and Mr. Ahmad. Or at the end of the session, we take the photo. Okay. Okay. So my name is Lim. I will be moderating this live session. And today we have 6 interesting papers to be presented. 1 from Indonesia, 2 from Malaysia, and 3 from Australia. Okay, so great to have you all here today this morning. And the first presenter is Madam Fairuz Mutia from Indonesia. Second, Suziana binti Wadi. Suziana is from where? Malaysia. Okay. And then the third speaker, Muhammad Ilham, Muhammad Yusof from Malaysia too. And following by Miss Lisa Khoury from Australia, Mr. Mojtaba from Australia too, and Dr. Paul from Australia too. So, okay, let me read out the house rules. First, today's session is being recorded and to be available for post-conference viewing. Second, if you have any questions for the presenters, please use the chat box feature in this WebEx. Then submit your question in the chat box for the presenters to answer. I will read your questions should the presenter is unable to view the chat box. If you have any technical questions, please reach out directly to me via the chat function. Each presenter today will have a total of 20 minutes with 10 to 15 minutes of presentation time and followed by 5 minutes Q&A session. I will post reminders in the chat box when the time is 5 minutes and 1 minute left. Please be alert on the chat box. Thank you. And if one of our presenters completes their presentation before their 20 minutes is up, there may be time for a question from attendees. However, we will hold most questions until the end of the session, and I will then read questions out loud for the presenters to answer as time permits. If you would like to ask questions directly to the presenter, you just on your mic, okay? It's okay. So now, let us welcome our first presenter, Madam Fairuz Mutia from Universitas Pembangunan Nasional Veteran Jawa Timur, Indonesia. The topic of the presentation is aquapuncture, a waterfront rejuvenation strategy for Jabon Sidoarjo. Okay. So without further ado, please welcome Madam Fairuz. Okay, the floor is yours. Thanks.
I can. Okay. Okay. Let me share my screen first. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the opportunity. On behalf of my co-authors, Dominikus Aditya and Askia Venezor, I will present our paper entitled Aquapuncture, a Waterfront Rejuvenation Strategy for Jabon, Sidoarjo, Indonesia. Okay, first of all, I would love to talk about what is Jabon actually. Jabon located in the East Java province, and it is located in the southern eastern part of Surabaya as the second largest city in Indonesia and as a natural tourist destination. Japan had a telocor marine tourism, or we call it in Bahasa Wisata Bahari Telocor. And it offers views of the rivers right and left side by a swath of mangrove trees. And the pier has a number of boats and speedboats leaning against it. Since in the eastern part of Telocor, there is a Lucy Island that hit by a mud volcano disaster at 2006. So the mud was formed into like a tiny island in the eastern part of Jabon district. Well, when we talk about the Jabon district, we always talk about the waterfront and marine focused tourism in Sidoarjo, Indonesia. But like any other regions and any other tourism destinations, it already depended on road access transits. And however, our previous research study shows a link between urban layout and tourism decrease. Every establishment in tourism towards Lodger seems off, while depending on road transit that not connected well. By examining the current waterways network, accessibility to tourist locations can be improved. And waterways and urban rural communities interact uniquely to create a distinctive tourism spot. So we tend to see that the study aims to identify the morphology of the Jabon shoreline to examine the viability of aquapuncture in the area. This is our previous study. We were using space index analysis and using depth map X software to analyze the integration value of vehicle in Jabon. As we know, there is a redness area, the yellow one and the blue one. The red, more red, the line is, it shows that the integration value is more high. So the possibilities of tourists or vehicle or people was across that road. But however, we see in the eastern part, the main tourism area, the road area seems like in a low integration value. So this is make us think about the further research in this study. We were using the literature review like Rian, Ujang, and Elias. And the most intriguing part when we talk about the review of Tang, they say that city regarded as like a human body and a living environment, which the physical components are the energy lines or the acupuncture said chi that need to be stimulated. And we offer good acupuncture. Well, the acupuncture itself is like a medical technique in Chinese, which like using a small needles that place into a skin that only in a specific place of the body, which regarded to be the energy lines or qi lines. And we were using the method of qualitative research and phenomenology approach. And in this study, we were using tissue analysis technique by Stojanovsky and Axelson. And our urban study locus is mainly on the Jabon district only to assess how the waterways can be rejuvenated by urban acupuncture, or we call it aquapuncture since we do it in the waterways. This is the first result. We were divided the area into a three segment. The first segment, we saw, although we saw the urban layout seems like a static tissue, it's scattered around with little lots here and there, and the road structure is quite obviously visible along the primary arterial road, but there is a bridge, but the bridge only utilized as the hub for the transportation, but not became a visual connection, spatial connections. And however, when we want to make the area intact, there must be a visual and spatial interactions between these nodes, especially since this is the primary entrance to the tourism area in the east and the end of this road. And this is the analysis of the segment 2 and segment 3. Maybe moreover like the same, despite being an organic, as we know that in Southeast Asia settlements, it tends to be an organic. And all of that is proven by the consistency of how the proportion of lot is distributed over the road network. And it seems really static. And as we see here in the segment 3, the campus tissue, it's only utilized by a big lots to a factory that has no relations to the development of tourism area. And we arrive into discussions how we can do the principles of good acupuncture in there. And according to Lloyd, there are 5 good acupuncture that needs to be done in an urban area. The first one is features unique architecture. The second one is entertainment hotspots. The third is historical emphasis. The fourth is transportation, making it accessible. And the fifth is districts of character. And we want to implement it in our districts in Japan. We talk about the acupuncture strategy since we want to add some needles in the chi of the waterways. So we use acupuncture that accounts for urban blue space that maximize the possibilities of the area's riverscape, which has potential as a waterfront area, but it's not perfect at present. This is the whole area that we want to give some needles in the waterways. The first one is feature unique architecture. We were using image referencing since we want to develop further research into this specific G area. The first one is feature unique architecture, gate and bridge. We can say that as a main link and entryway to Tlocho River tourism, this piece must be iconic and memorable. The second one, a unique gate and bridge might be a landmark and welcome place for Tlocho River tourism. And the second one, the second notes, feature unique architecture, sculpture, and focal point. A sculpture enhances the second development node along the river. Sculpture will create a visual connections between riverfront stops, and the sculptures should have a strong notion like water, genealogy, or in a grande and majestic scale. Maybe if it's not possible to build it in the middle of the waterways, we can accomplish it in the riverside. And the third one is entertainment hotspot, education, culinary, and water sport. In the third note, this is the center of the journey. It's crucial since we see it before. The road network is very long and it's a linear line and may be boring. So the lack of nearby homes could hinder the development. So this place needs a revitalizing concept to generate a vibrant atmosphere, such as educational program, riverbank culinary sections, or water sports. And this is the district of character. This is in the Fort North. And geographically, it's the morphology is curved riverside walkway near the waterways of Porong, the waterways named Porong. And this region should have a unique design to unify the series before the fifth nodes as the final destinations or the main attraction. And this is the main area, main attractions. The fifth node is Tlocho River tourism final destinations. The attractions already exist, but the existing attractions need refurbishment to attract tourists and establish personality. The riverside amphitheater, floating platform, or boat or ferry pier may promote tourism visitors. Okay, we come to the conclusions that according to the findings, aquapuncture could be utilized to revitalize the river in multiple locations. With the application of urban aquapuncture, riverfront tourist spots can be rejuvenated and continuously improved. On the western side, water level management is being done through the use of sluices, pumping station and weirs. On the other hand, concerns regarding the restorations and utilization of cultural and historical resources within and along the river should be raised on the eastern bank. In order to improve people's ability to think spatially, marine activities such as sailing or a ritual, nyadran floating flower, and historic ship regattas, water concert, and so on should be developed. The adaptation of aquapuncture to inland waterways will continue to be an essential component in the reduction of global impact. I think that is all about my presentations. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Fairuz. It's a very interesting presentation from Indonesia. Okay, good. So any questions from the floor, please type in to the chat box or just raise your hand and we will try to unmute you and you may ask question. All right. If I may ask a question, yeah, from Dr. Paulo, Dr. Paula. Okay. How does the node interventions activate the surrounding areas?
Well, okay, since this is need a further research, Dr. Paula, so we will develop another research to like maybe evaluating more about is that really a G line? So we have to like develop the nodes more, or maybe we want to use some participatory approach to see that if our conclusions like the best choice or not, and we really need a further research to answer this actually, but we believe that before our previous research in space syntax analysis, and we see that the lines must be rejuvenated, but how we evaluating is that the right decisions or the right spot is make us to do more further research. Thank you. I think that is that I can answer.
Thanks for the answer. Yeah. And thanks for the question from Dr. Paula. Okay. Any more questions? If I may ask, is this research already completed or still ongoing?
Okay. Actually, this is an ongoing research. This is our second year to analyze the district, and we will do more 1 year to complete the assessment of. Actually, this is a big project, like a visual and spatial analysis of the district. So I think it we 1 more year to complete the entire process of the visual and spatial research on this area.
Yeah, I think this aquapuncture concept is interesting. Is there any other cases apply in Indonesia besides your study?
Well, in Indonesia, mostly tend to see more in urban acupuncture. So it really takes a lot in the parks or in the open spaces or in the road network, but I think it's a little research on aquapuncture itself. So we want to promote a new linkage of uh, what can be acupuncture, but in the waterways, since we were focusing on the waterways research in our team project.
Very good. Contributing to the Indonesian context. Okay, very good. Okay, if there is no more questions, then we thank Madam Fairuz for the interesting presentation. Okay, thank you so much. Now, let's go to the second presenter. I call Madam Madam Sujana, boleh ya? Madam Sujana binti Wadi from Malaysia, and her presentation is about preliminary tax status, status in local authorities using Geographic Information System (GIS). Okay, without further ado, please welcome Madam Sujana. Right, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Okay, can you hear me?
Can.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning to all of you. Okay, my name is Suziana binti Wardi Ariswargi. I'm from University Tanjung Mara. So this is the title of my research. It's about preliminary tax status in local authorities using Geographic Information System. We call it GIS. Okay. Okay, this is the outline of my presentation. We have introduction, aim and objective, problem statement, significance of study, literature review, research methodology, expected result, and discussion. So we go to the introduction. So we go see what is the assessment tax. So assessment tax is assessment tax review is the main source of income for local authorities, which is used to support services and maintenance in local authority administrative areas. So this fee is used to maintain the local region, such as provide for urban planning, public health, waste management, and other services. So as you can see, lately nowadays the assessment tax becoming a big issue because of the tax areas. So as you can see, this in Sandakan, okay, the tax areas is reached to 33 million, okay, on July 2020. So and as you can see, at Berita Harian, March 2021, okay, the tax areas is reached more than 6 billion. So this is huge number actually. So we go to the problem statement. Okay, so most of local authority, sorry. Okay, most of local authorities struggle to manage assessment tax due to the following problems. So first, assessment tax areas are getting higher. Tax areas collection performance decrease. Area expansion and difficult monitoring. This difficult monitoring with manually monitoring. Okay, and area of operation is expanding, but the tax revenue collected cannot cover the additional operating costs. So, if this situation is often for many years, it is not bad. It is not good to the local authorities, because when the amount of collection is low, local authorities does not have enough funds to cover administrative and services costs in their area of responsibility. So this paper is recommend GIS solution to the local authorities to manage their assessment tax. So as you can see, why? Okay, wait a minute, because I want to remove. Okay, sorry, I want to remove my this bar. Okay. Okay, it's okay. We look why we need GIS. Okay, first, okay, currently, in local authorities, tax data is in non-spatial, in tabular format. So the current practice, so there's no XY data, no coordinates, and only can see in tabular form. Okay, with GIS, okay, the assessment text that is recorded with the location will be transformed into interactive and informative maps. So with GIS, the information the information of the information of text will give the where is the taxpayer, what is the information, so the information is more valuable and more interactive and informative. So of course, when we talk about GIS, this is related to the maps. So so in the end, there are many benefits of GIS to the local authority, such as cost saving resulting from greater efficiency, okay, map visualization, okay, of course, data management, and with GIS, you can do data analysis. And with GIS also, you can, local authority can give better decision making and better geographic information record keeping. Okay. So we focus to the research objectives. So this is the aim of the research, improving the efficiency and effectiveness of local authorities towards providing of service to customer using GIS. So this paper is a part of the research. So the objective is this paper is to demonstrate data collection using mobile application. Okay, so why I choose mobile application? So lately, okay, the mobile application is one of the option. Instead, we have purchased GNSS, or we call GPS equipment. So with mobile application, we can update quickly and easily. So just using your smartphone or tablet, so you can do by your own self. So it is free software and allows to attach photo, video clips, audio notes, and offline connection. So mobile application, okay, the application allows easy and fast collection and updating of data directly in the field using a phone or tablet with an Android operating system. Okay, this paper is using Android operating system, so without the need for an internet connection. So that's mean they are offline when you do your data collection. So according to the GRAB 2020, the mean standard deviation of horizontal coordinate determination made using mobile phones range from 2.84 to 5. It means 5 meters, around 5 meters, we can get the accuracy of the data that we collect. Okay, for more accurate localization, okay, the application is able to connect via Bluetooth to an external GPS antenna. So if we want the data is more accurate, we can use an external GPS antenna. Okay. So why this study is significant? Okay, first, this study with supporting local authorities in managing assessment tax performance in more properly monitor. The account holders' location and payment information were obtained and stored for future using GIS. So enforcement team also can be done more strategically and with a focus on those targeted region. So then GIS data for assessment tax can be seen through a web application, which is accessible from any location and any time. And GIS analysis make it easier for manager to view tax assessment statistic and make decision. Okay, this is literature review. I found some literature review about tax assessment. Okay, as you can see, first row, study by Lee Hanwei, rates collection in Manjung. So the research objective is about rates collection. So if you can see the last column, similarities and differences to present study. So the differences with my study is, of course, the difference objective, and this approach not using GIS as solution. Okay, second study is from Razlan Abdul Razak. So this research objective is to identify factors contribute to unsatisfactory assessment tax and tax areas. So as you can see, the differences to present study, in my study, method of current study involve questionnaire and field data collection and different objective. Okay, by Shahrul bin Baharom. Okay, this is study using yes, this is approach using GIS and the data collection, the method, as you can see, data collection from UAV, GIS data processing using Map Info Professional, and he do GIS analysis. So the similarities, the current study is same with my study is using a GIS approach. So the difference, data collection will be carried out using mobile application. Okay, as I mentioned earlier. GIS data processing will be using ArcGIS desktop. Okay. So the next is from Anusin Suraj Kumar, the title Designing Geographic Information System Tax Assessment in India. So, okay, this is to develop a GIS database and evaluate parameters for property tax calculation. So, this study is using GIS approach, but the different, of course, the different method, because in this study, they are using world view to imagery, satellite imagery, using digitizing, processing. Okay. So in my study, the data is collected using mobile application. So GIS information on monitoring payment. Okay. So from that, from the previous study, so research into how GIS might be used to monitor regularly is still limited. So from the point of view perspective, this paper will offer improvement. GIS data collection using mobile application. Okay, tax payment status will be in GIS web application, and monitoring of payment status regularly. Okay, this is the main research actually. So as I said, this is a preliminary of the tax payment status research. So this paper, I highlight again, the objective is to demonstrate data collection using mobile application. So methodology, okay, this is source of data. We have primary data, the GIS data collection from fieldwork using mobile application. So the secondary data, list of holding account, okay, cadastral lot and orthophoto. So list of holding account is, as you can see, this is the information that there are many information about the status payment, about the address. We were going to use this information to convert to GIS data. Okay, this is the how the methodology. Okay, so first we will receive data list of taxpayers. Okay, first we are going to do data preparation. Okay, data collection, data verification, and data storage. So we go to first data preparation. So okay, first. In this study, we will receive data list of taxpayers. Okay, there are, as I said, there are so many information. So this list is received from local authority. So and the format is from Excel format. Lots of information such as account number, address, number lot, status payment. And okay, in this list, they are not have coordinate XY. Okay, so what we're going to do after we receive the list, okay, we do the geocoding process. Okay, geocoding process is the process converting address. So address is from this list. So they are column. Have column address. So using the column that have information, address information, so we are going to geocode into a geographic coordinates. Okay, so this software we will using ArcGIS desktop. Okay, so after that we will do the field data collection. So first, of course, we need to install Locus GIS. Okay, so for mobile application, I use Locus GIS is the software. Okay, the Android platform, and we need to install first, and then import data into Locus GIS. Okay, import data means geocoding data. Okay, geocoding data and just copy data into the mobile internal storage. And when we talk about GIS, so we need to choose coordinate WGS 84. So the world coordinates. Okay, so then we can start updating. It is a simple application that even if you are not GIS person, you can do by yourself. So data transfer, say once you have complete your you have done your data collection at site, you must export data, okay, into shapefile format. So shapefile format is a common GIS format. So once we have finished data collection at sites, we need to verify. Okay, we need to look back the output of the data collection. Okay, this output from data collection. Of course, when we do data collection, text data in GIS ready. Okay, they have XY coordinate. Okay, so spatial adjustment. Okay, spatial adjustment actually is to compare. Okay, here we have to overlay the data collection. Need to overlay with cadastral lot. So in Malaysia we call NDCDB. This lot we get from Department of Survey and Mapping Malaysia, and UAV imagery from UAV imagery. And okay, spatial adjustment actually is provide interactive methods to align and integrate your data and allow to improve the quality of your data. Okay, so then we will do data cleaning. Okay, during data collection.
Miss Tujana,
Yeah.
Sorry. Because you do not have enough time, please kindly wrap up. You have,
Okay.
please kindly
Okay.
wrap up, go to the last slide. Thank you.
All right. So okay, so data cleaning. So data cleaning is okay about attribute and spatial. So this is the GIS database, the output of the okay, data collection. So this is the expected result as non-spatial to spatial data. Okay, so this is the last slide about discussion. So local authorities can start by providing GIS data through mobile application because with mobile application, okay, local authorities that have budget constraint and want to look to some small scale. So mobile application is the good solution to the local authorities. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sujana. Okay, it's a very interesting presentation on GIS application in helping the tax collection for local authority. Okay, so any questions from the floor? If I may ask one question, Ms. Sujana.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges that you face in applying this GIS in collecting the tax?
And collecting tax. Okay. Of course. During data collection, using mobile collection, mobile application. Okay. Okay. The one of challenges during the data collection is of course the weather. Okay, and then to get the accuracy, we need to spend more than around 5 minutes. So if the weather is hot, so you're not tak selesa kan. So this is challenging because this is this local GIS is a simple application, but when you using local GIS, you can see the accuracy. So ongoing to you have to below 5 meters or what you want to 3 meters accuracy. So it's difficult. It's one challenge.
Interesting. Okay, any more questions from the floor? Okay, I think there is none. So we thank you for the interesting presentation, Puan Sujana. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. So now we go to the next the presenter, Mr. Muhammad Ilham Muhammad Yusof from Malaysia. I think UiTM, right? And his presentation is on trust as an element for community participation in the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, localization process in Malaysia. Okay, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Muhammad Ilham. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hi everyone to my fellow friends from Malaysia and other countries as well. My name is Muhammad Idham bin Mat Yusof, together with my friends Dr. Radwan Yusof, Dr. Farah Adila Abdul Rahman, Dr. Tuan Nuriani Tuan Ismail from ITM. We would like to present our paper entitled Trust as an Element for Community Participation in the Sustainable Development Goals Localization Process in Malaysia. The terms of localization in SDG can be defined as the process of defining, implementing, and monitoring strategies at the local level for achieving global, national, and subnational SDG and targets. This has been highlighted by the World Cities Report 2020. So this definition of localization of SDG can be regarded as the most comprehensive or the simplest understanding for us to identify what is SDG localization is all about. However, there is a very limited definition of SDG localization from academic perspective or from the literature. However, looking into the terms of SDG localization, we can see that the terms of SDG localization is referring to how the SDG should be localized at the local level, at the third and lowest levels of governments, that is at the localities, at the local government levels. SDG as the United Nations agenda, which will be ended by 2030, is a long-term agenda comprising of economic, social, and environmental sustainability initiatives. However, the terms for the SDG to be localized was being given boost at the Civil Commitment 2019, and only in a very few past many years, local agencies, international agencies, and national at the country levels, national governments has started and beginning to localize the SDG, looking into the SDG progression that is not encouraging based on the report being reported at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum. Looking into Malaysian context, SDG localization is a new thing. It is relatively new in Malaysia, and only few literature being presented and available looking into topics of SDG localization. Ku and Tan, for example, discussing on localization of SDG from the civil society perspective. However, only Rahman and Yusuf et al. That presenting or conducting a research on SDG localization at the local government levels and incorporating it with the element of trust. So it shows that SDG localization as a topic and research area is something that is promising and could support the SDG can support SDG progression as well at the country levels. So this research aimed to answer one important question, that is, how is trust and community participation associated with SDG localization in Malaysia context? Literature shows that for us to localize the SDG at the local levels, there are few requirements that need to be fulfilled. Of course, among all is SDG awareness is important at all governmental levels. Since SDG being implemented or being introduced in 2015, voluntarily, it should be implemented at the country level and national levels. However, the awareness was not being further down at the subnational and local government levels. So the first things that need to be done if the country level would like to localize the SDG would be to make sure that SDG awareness are being embedded at all governmental levels, at the regional levels, at the subnational levels, local levels, community levels. And we need partnership, of course, because looking at the SDG 17 on partnership, this is the most important thing. Everyone should work together at the multi-level of government and multi-stakeholders, as being illustrated by United Nations. We have a multi stakeholders and has been highlighted by United Nations. So partnership is one of criteria for us to localize the SDG. We need financial support, we need capacity building, we need data management, and we need integrated SDG approaches. So this is requirements as being presented by previous literature. Looking into the participation and trust concept in localizing the SDG, yes, we need public to participate in it, and we need their trust to participate on SDG localization project and activities. However, a few authors highlighted that the extent of public participation into SDG project and programs. For example, Muhammadi arguing on or highlighting that the public participation is either extensive or limited from various perspectives. From community perspective, their participation should be extensive at all levels of governance. However, from the local government levels, they prefer a limited public participation because they still thinking that public should not participate extensively and hindering the local democracy. And lack of trust is an issue at local government. So that is also one of the reasons why public prefer not to participate in sustainability projects or activities, and by developing their trust, it will affect also their partnership and collaboration and also participation in projects at the local government. Other than that, accountability, integrations, a lack of democracy and resources is also the hindrance of the SDG localization from literature perspective. Globally, when we are talking about SDG localization strategies, most of the countries has include state government and local government at the voluntary reviews of SDG in their reportings. In Malaysia, for example, in certain local government, they have started the inclusive participation. Examples, local government in Penang, they have gender responsive budgetary system where involving women into budgeting systems. This is to support the inclusive participation into the SDG implementation at the local government in Penang. Certain countries, South Africa, Spain, and Uruguay, they also practicing the open government to be more transparent. In Japan, they have this SDG promotion headquarters to localize the SDG at various levels. In Indonesia, they have SDG in the sub-national planning down to the community, regional levels, village levels, because SDG will being part of the law through the presidential decree. So the structure of SDG localization and SDG governance itself is different according to countries, depending also based on the political will of each country adopting this SDG. This is a qualitative approach. Using case study, we interviewed 5 informants representing 3 local governments in the different categories: city council, municipal council, and district councils from the northern and southern part of Malaysia. And we are using purposive sampling technique, and data were being analyzed thematically. The result is we identified that for SDG localization take place at the local government, we need to develop community trust. And this community trust require multi-stakeholders engagement and community inclusivity through public participation activities. This was highlighted by the informant, where local government representatives and officers agreed that to implement SDG localization, they as the officer at the local government, they cannot do it alone. They need to collaborate with other stakeholders and partnership through corporate social responsibility initiatives. So this study has identified these strategies to develop the trust building between the local government also with the community. The community will be inclusively included into the decision-making process through the focus group discussion, through the town planning, through the decision-making process, and also organizing and implementing the projects. Local government using a social media and to portray and to inform SDG to the community. Community is the initiator of the community-based projects and programs, and local government give rewards and recognition, and organizing a fun and entertainment program. So these are all findings, main findings from this research, which it could develop the trust among the community for them to involve in the SDG related projects and programs at the local government levels. All right, so go further, looking into the strategy to develop the trust among the community to actively engage in SDG projects. Number one, need active roles of local government officers as the internal stakeholders, and there's a need for a visible SDG governance mechanisms. As the third level of government levels in Malaysia, local government is being empowered and having certain levels of autonomy. So they can decide on how the SDG governance mechanism could be designed in their system at the local government. So this study identified that and informant also agreed that local government officers as the internal stakeholders, they need, number one, know about SDG. However, their exposure are being limited. There's no direct exposure from the from the state governments or even from the federal government. So the active roles of local government officers in SDG, depending, number one, on the exposure with the partners from international examples, United Nations and others, and also based on the leadership, that is the mayor or the presidents of the local government. Because if the mayor and the president of the local governments are aware of SDG and they wanted to bring changes at the local government towards SDG, then the policy are being designed within the context of local government. And SDG governance is different from one local government to other local government. For one local government, is being put under the corporate department. In other local government, was being put under community department, while others are being spread out into different department at the local government, because SDG will be regarded as the as an effort which everyone have to work it together. For strategy number 2, to build trust with the community, local government in Malaysia, based on the informants' responses, need active roles of local leaders, councillors, and local champions. These are being regarded as the external stakeholders. Local leaders are the community leaders. Councillors are being appointed by the local government and representing each area or area officer at the local government in Malaysia. And local champions are those who can really represent the local community, can be the mediator between the local government and also with the local community. So these 3 local governments in the study identified that the roles of these local leader, councillor, and local champion could assist to develop a community trust for them to involve in SDG related projects. However, similarly, all local governments said that the councillor is quite passive in becoming the mediator between the local government and also with the local community. Even though councillors are being paid with allowances and have a specific budgets for them to initiate their own SDG related projects, the most easier one is for the local government to approach the local champion, as these local champions are the individual who are being truly trusted by the local community. Only then they can involve actively in the SDG related project initiated either by the community or by the local government. Strategy number 2, extensive community engagement. Certain local government has created sustainable community project, sustainable community program. They were being involved as the partners of the project being initiated by the local community, and together with the local government organize the projects of SDG, which is benefiting to the local community as well. Reward and recognition is the most important thing. The situation has been changing in Malaysia. The issue here is usually community will ask for reward and recognition for them to involve in SDG related projects, as basic as whether local government providing meals, or there is a token of appreciations or no competitions whatsoever. So reward and recognition is very important to attract community to involve in projects and communities related to SDG. However, in Malaysia also, it was identified similarly by all 3 local government that clean-up activities or gotong royong in Malay, the activities has becoming less attractive to the community. They are not interested to involve with the cleanup activities, the gotong royong projects, because a local community says that it is the duty and responsibility of the local government. This is something that we need to ponder, because maybe the socio-demographic and the behavior of our community has become changing due to several factors. And our local community, to develop the trust, they look for interactive projects and programs. No more environmental projects and programs where they have to clean up their own housing areas, their own environment, but they wanted something, environmental projects and programs that benefiting the community, something that such as trash to cash, something that they can generate income, community garden where they can sell the products, the vegetables, to empower the community and others, and projects and programs where involve social media, involve competition, involve entertainments, involve cultural values, involve exhibition from government agencies. So the strategy number 5 is for them to involve in SDG related projects and programs. Local governments is that they create interactive projects and programs. Only then their project will be receive a huge impact from the community and local people as well. So at the end of this research, we identified that we developed this framework of trust and community participation in the SDG localization in process in Malaysia. To develop the trust, we need 5 prerequisites to be occur. Number 1 would be local government need to engage with multi-stakeholders, education system, government agencies, vertical and horizontal engagement, and of course from the United Nations agencies or international agencies who excel in SDG localization process. There is a limited engagement with the state government, and of course, currently what they did was SDG was not being done extensively because they still localize the projects based on the LA21 or local agenda project and programs. However, local government in Malaysia, few of them has started to prepare reports of voluntary local review to local government from Selangor, and the state government also in Selangor has started to provide and preparing a voluntary state government review and SDG at the state level. So SDG is not being extensively localized at the state and local government. It depends on the state government commitment as well. So we need to engage with as many as stakeholders, internal and external government agencies and international organizations who excel and advocate for SDG as well. Community need to be inclusively participated and engaged through various mechanisms and platforms. This is to support the local democracy, rewards and recognition, to attract their appearance into the SDG projects and interactive strategies, the use of social medias, the use of entertainment projects and programs, and at the same time involve the environmental advocacy at the same time. Only then the trust is being developed and they will repeatedly participate at the SDG related projects. And at the end, as being mentioned by the local government officer, when the trust has been developed and they extensively participate, it able to empower the community in the projects and the program are being sustained. So currently among the project that is being sustained is the trash to cash and also community garden and also the 3R projects where they are able to transform the trash into something, new products where can sustain and can generate incomes. So as a conclusion, localization of SDG in Malaysia is still at the early stage. It requires political will, it requires policy, it requires a top-down approach and bottom-up approach, and people and community at the local levels, at the specific local government and community groups, they need to be actively and meaningfully participating in the SDG localization, because the achievement of SDG at the local level will support the progression of SDG at the state and country levels. However, trust must first be established and developed, and the use of social medias and various activities need to be aligned with the SDG, no more with Local Agenda 21. And this study cannot be generalized. It did not portray the whole phenomenon, or it cannot give a universal understandings on what is happening in Malaysia, because we only choose 3 local government from northern and southern part of Malaysia. However, it does provide understanding what is the current situation of SDG localization at the local levels, and it was suggested that this study to be extended to reflect whole local governments at a different region in Malaysia, including those in Sabah and Sarawak, and more extensive studies can be recommended, and it can be translated as well with this survey, looking into the community perspective of their SDG knowledge and their SDG practices. So finally, I would like to thank the Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Studies for the internal research grant and to funding this research as well. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Cik Ilham. Okay, so it's a very interesting research in localizing SDGs in Malaysia from the element of trust. Okay, so we open the floor for questions. Okay. If I may ask a question, Mr.
Yes.
Ilham, because I am kind of researching into the community participation topic.
All right.
So what I can see from your framework that you form is could be lacking of impact because trust is a tested element in community participation framework. A lot of framework can be found online and the literature. And of course, localizing SDGs is new in Malaysia, but those kind of programs, okay, done by authorities. There are many other types of similar to this localizing SDGs in Malaysia. So my question is what is the impact of your research? Because the trust element is already identified, okay, as an important element in a community participation topic. Thanks.
Yeah, in the community participation topic, yes, trust is an element. One of our group as well, the PhD studies is on trust elements into the public participation. However, we are looking into the sustainable development goals, related projects and programs. SDG localization is a current topics that we need to explore. There are lacking SDG localization research in Malaysia compared to other countries. So we are looking into their trust on the projects and programs and activities related to the SDG. How their trust and involvement and participation into the SDG actually can support the progression of SDG, not only at the local levels, but also at the state levels and government and also at the country levels. If we compare research from other countries, SDG localization has been extensively done in Indonesia, for instance, and we can see the SDG participation at the village levels is very extensive in Indonesia. They are being empowered with budgetary systems. They are able to give opinions and give suggestions and involve in policy making. But unlike in Malaysia, the situation might be different. So as I'm said that the gotong royong or cleanliness projects and programs has getting fading in Malaysia. They are not interested to join with the gotong royong or cleaning up project anymore. They are looking into other project and programs. And if we align with the SDG localization, what types of SDG projects that our community actually wanted and prefer. So from there we can mapping at the local level, state levels, and federal or country levels how the situation was, how the trust actually changing the community perception towards SDG projects. Because at the same time it lead to the sustainability approaches and sustainability progression as well. So I believe that this research still provides extensive impacts and novel values at the same time. And in fact, this study has received a national grant, and we are extending the local government to include also with the Sabah and Sarawak as well. And we are actively writing papers and journals by focusing on SDG localization in local government and also at the organizational level as well. So that because we believe that SDG should be part of our culture, SDG should be a policy at various levels at the state, local government, because it will support the SDG progression and SDG ranking as well at the United Nations levels.
Correct. I totally agree with you. Okay, and good luck to your research.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any more questions from the floor? If there is none, then thank you so much, Mr. Ilham.
All right, thank you so much.
Presentation. Okay. So next, let's welcome Lisa Curry from Australia. Okay, and her presentations is about design for adaptability and disassembly towards zero construction waste in the Australian housing sector. Okay, without further ado, let's welcome Lisa. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you. Now I'll just share my presentation.
Sure.
Okay. Maybe I need some assistance just to get that up. Just wait a moment. Oh, I have to do open. Oh, go back to. Just wait a moment. It's problematic. Yeah,
You can,
maybe I just go back to my screen here.
yeah, try.
Just to share.
Mhm.
It's maybe it's because it's connected to that. If I just take that out.
No, it's the system.
Oh, that is the whole
Yeah,
system.
keep going. Doesn't.
Yeah.
Save your presentation on something and give it to me.
Okay.
You will open online.
All right. Just wait a moment. We just have a bit of a technical issue here. So,
So Lisa, you may take your time.
sorry, just 1 minute. Okay.
Save your presentation.
Okay.
You want to send it?
I can send it to you.
Should I make Paula as a presenter, Lisa?
It's more that my presentation is on my computer, so I just have to send it. So,
I see.
yeah.
So you're going to use Paula's computer?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, all right.
Is the presentation, Lisa?
I put it, it'll be on OneDrive.
Oh, OneDrive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And send. So I'll plug it in. Yep. Okay. The dark is there. So I just take my stop my yes. So if I can make Paola the presenter. If you can make Paola the presenter.
Sure, I'm passing the presenter credentials to Paula's computer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
It doesn't work with your presentation. Don't know. Anyway. So. Let's go back to these. What is it? Can share.
There we are. Yep.
That we need now to share the screen one because it does it on here. So share.
And then slideshow. Yeah.
And let's see.
Yes, you can see Paula's screen. Yes.
Yes, you can now.
Lisa, you can use you're using Paula as the camera. Paula's PC as the camera.
That's right. Using Paola's.
Okay.
Yes, Paola's computer. That's right. Now. Okay. All right. Sorry about that technical hitch. That's just with the two computers in the room. So, thank you for reading out the title, Designed for Adaptability and Disassembly Towards Zero Construction Waste in the Australian Housing Sector. So this paper is part of a research project.
Lisa, can you switch on Paul's camera? Cannot see you.
All right.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry.
Yep.
Okay, go back here. Where are you?
Is it because it's sharing?
Yeah. So you should just screen and stop sharing.
Video.
The video is on.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay.
Oh, right.
So now you can share the presentation slides.
Share.
Okay. All right.
You've got both now, the video and the
Yeah, you can
presentation?
just click on the slideshow.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent.
Right.
All right.
Proceed.
Thank you. So this paper has been written in collaboration with Dr. Paola Liardini, and it's part of a research project that is looking at adaptable housing types using prefabrication systems for the Australian housing sector. So in Australia and elsewhere, the built environment, it's well known that it's the biggest consumer of natural resources globally, with construction and demolition materials among the biggest sources of waste in developed countries. In Australia, the housing sector continues to be used use construction methods based on a take, make, waste linear model, which is an unsustainable practice on a planet of finite natural resources and increasing population. National demand on materials for new housing construction is exacerbated by the fact that most dominant type of dwelling in Australia is the detached house on land, and contemporary Australian houses are the biggest in the world. Making way for mostly detached houses in suburban sites, existing old houses are often demolished as they are regarded by owners as functionally obsolete, or the cost of renovation, alterations and additions to the existing house is comparable to the cost of a new house altogether, designed to the owner's current lifestyle needs and aspirations. The common practice of house demolition reduces materials to rubble to be taken to landfill. Construction and demolition material is a significant 44% of waste in landfill. So internationally, there is a design shift to transition the housing construction market to a circular economy, which keeps materials in use for longer. However, this transition has not started in Australia yet. This paper will discuss constraints and opportunities for the implementation of circular design in the Australian housing market, including social and environmental impacts at the city scale, focusing on two key approaches that aim to increase the longevity of buildings and materials. That is, design for adaptability and design for disassembly. Firstly, I'd like to say that this presentation will just show key findings from the paper, and of course there's more detail in the paper itself. It's based on the review of literature of design for adaptability and design for disassembly, especially housing projects that are applicable to the Australian housing market. In most developed countries, including Australia, the construction industry still operates on the obsolete take, make, waste linear model, and that's represented in this diagram here as the vertical spine of the processes in the middle of the diagram. The problem with this, natural resources are unproductively used and disposed. Growing internationally as an alternative approach to the current unsustainable linear system is a circular economy. So this is viewed as an ecosystem where natural resources are preserved and enhanced, renewable resources are optimised, waste is prevented, and negative externalities are designed out. The aim is to keep materials, products, and components in repetitive loops of use, maintaining and handling them to preserve their value for longer. In the literature for design for adaptability, there's a key strategy that reoccurs in different authors' ideas and strategies for adaptable buildings, and this is Brand's shearing layers concept. So it's a concept where the building is seen as a series of layers, and the inner layers is acknowledged as having shorter lifespans to enable change or replacement without affecting the integrity of the outer layers of structure, services, and skin. And what I've done to Brand's shearing layers concept here is provided my own definition of adaptable and flexible buildings, because across the literature of adaptable and flexible buildings, there's different definitions. So I've got this working definition that flexible buildings are what happens to the layers of space, which is the internal fit out of walls, floors, and ceilings inside the building, and stuff is the furniture, lighting, appliances, things that can be moved easily by the occupants themselves. And that adaptable buildings are those where you need to make changes to the services, the structure, and the skin. And the beauty of Brand shearing layers diagram is if you design buildings in terms of these accessible layers, you can keep the integrity of the materials and parts in use for longer, that less damage and pollution will occur from design buildings this way. Another key set of authors in the adaptability literature, Schmidt and Austin, and they did a review of hundreds of, over 200 adaptable buildings across the world and came up with 6 levels of adaptability, from adjustable, versatile, refittable, scalable, convertible, and movable. And this definition of scalable buildings is what I've used in my research. And that's the idea of a building that it can be extended from its original size, but also that it can be contracted. And this is an idea that up till, or using conventional construction methods, it means that with extensions, you're going to create some element of demolition and there'll be some waste. But with the ability of prefabrication, if you can actually design the buildings for that future change, you're going to design out waste of the materials. So that leads me to this, the next field of the literature review, which was the design for disassembly. So these are 2 very seminal projects in this field. Cellophane House by Kieran Timberlake was constructed in the front of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it was largely built off-site in chunks and then delivered in a certain order, and it remained there for 10 months. It is made out of aluminium components, and they're all bolted and have plate and bolt connections that could then be disassembled after the 10-month period. So the disassembly sequence for that building was that it was taken totally apart and all the different like components were stacked and catalogued and stored together for future use. This other project that I have on the slide is House R128, and this was built and designed 10 years earlier, before circular economy was a topic or a set of terms that people would refer to. And it was basically used the same principle that the steel framing would use bolt connections, and it could mean that the building could be disassembled and taken apart and taken elsewhere. These are some recent projects in the Netherlands, and they're based on prefabrication systems that are designed for assembly, disassembly, and the benefits are that they can be reused. And this really fits into the lens of circular economy, because we need to be keeping materials in use beyond one building life cycle. So the Triodos Bank Office building is a rare project to look at, because it actually uses a CLT, cross-laminated timber, which is the main material that we're using in our, or studying in our research project here at the University of Queensland. These other buildings use a lot of steel and aluminium components to still create that flexibility of bolt connections that can be disassembled at the end of life. The greenhouse is a building that has been specifically designed to only exist on that site for 15 years, and then it will be disassembled and taken away. So another key concept that I just share with you in this presentation is incremental housing. So it has precedence in vernacular design and has been used as starter homes in projects by Elemental. And so these starter homes are basically half houses that have then an adjoining void space to the side that can be filled in and built by the owners when they have finances to be able to extend their home, and to do so with materials of their own that they've found themselves. That's in the case of this Quinta Monray project, that the materials have been sourced by the different owners. So that creates a fairly haphazard aesthetic, which it's hard to control. So this other project by Villa Verde has more of a set of ordering principles for what materials get used. But the actual arrangement of rooms and what people decide to put in their rooms and where they put the windows is still up. It's still their decision, and it helps make their buildings, their homes more unique. Learning from other international examples of adaptable housing, the Grow Home by Avi Friedman is he's a fairly influential author in the sphere of adaptable housing, and he has devised this Grow Home terrace house, which has unfinished space in the attic as well as the basement. So he's produced this a very key set of diagrams and concepts about add-in and add-on methods of extension. And as drawn here, this is applied to a detached dwelling. I've added this other layer of understanding about flexible and adaptable buildings on this diagram. I've got the add-in extensions are those which would be defined as flexible. So they're the type of extensions that can be done by the occupants themselves. So finishing off the attic and finishing the basement, or in Australia, we have a lot of houses that may be elevated off the ground. So you can fill out the undercroft area underneath the building. And then the add-on extensions occur to the exterior of the house, requiring change to the structure. And using conventional construction techniques, that will mean that there's going to be some demolition and some waste created when you're adding on to an existing building. But if you use prefabricated construction methods, you can design for that and design the joints so that they can be occur with keeping the components of the structure in place. So you can design out, you can reduce the effect of the construction materials being wasted. So with the Australian housing context, there are three main issues that affect housing design in Australia, and those are that our demographics have changed over time, that we have a housing affordability problem in Australia, and also that housing needs to address environmental concerns of climate change. But the main focus of my research is to look at the issue of how households have changed over time, and that we need to be building new housing that fits these different types of households that we have. So this is a snapshot of the percentages of Australian household types that was based on the census last year. We have 10.8 million households in Australia, and more than a quarter are single person households. Family households, couple family with children, is indeed the largest portion of the Australian household types, but it's not like the most dominant. There is also regarded as a family household type by the Australian Bureau of Statistics is couple family without children, but that's actually still a two-person household. So when you look at those two segments together, half of all Australian households are one or two person households, but the houses that continue to be built are based on the default model of the four-person household. So there needs to be for all new housing, we need to be building perhaps smaller types of dwellings to facilitate these smaller household sizes. In Australia, we do have a history of adaptable housing, actually movable housing. Since early settlement days, it's been common practice to relocate lightweight timber Queensland houses, extend or reconfigure them. And we also have, back in our early settlement days, history of prefabricated houses when European settlers imported flat-packed timber buildings from the UK and Asia. So timber construction, as I've already mentioned, is the key material that we're looking at to combine these ideas of design for disassembly and adaptability for the Australian housing context, because it fits in well with the aspirations of a circular economy. Circular design requires a holistic approach that spans the whole life cycle of a building, from the choice of materials, components and construction methods to its end of life. And in this perspective, timber prefabrication has been recognised as a technological means to constructing circular and adaptable housing. So moving on from this literature review, my research involves a survey of different housing cohorts that exist in Australia. So I can then understand what are the needs of households at various stages of life, and how does the housing need to adapt for those different stages of life. And these ideas that Avi Friedman so succinctly put add in and add on his in his research, if that could be now facilitated through prefabricated design, so those parts of those extensions no longer are they just remain in that extended form of that building, but they could possibly become, the buildings could be contracted back in size, and those parts that are used for the extensions can be recirculated and reused in other building projects. So to conclude, in Australia, the uptake of circular models of housing is slowed down by the prevalent view of houses as an asset rather than a place to live. And that's a context that I've talked about more in the paper. And focusing on the dwelling as a place to live and creating a framework for adaptable, scalable housing that suits diverse households in different stages of life is a view that needs to be brought to the foreground of housing design. And I hope with this research that I'll be doing that. And the scalable housing could be an affordable pathway to home ownership. When combined with an off-site timber manufacturing, this model provides a tangible and effective way to implement circular principles in construction, paving the way towards zero material waste and to transition cities to a circular economy. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Lisa, for your insightful presentation. Okay, so we open Q&A from the floor, please.
Yeah, so there's questions.
Oh, yes.
Question.
Yeah. Maybe the admin, please help unmute Paul. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa. Haki here.
Hi.
Very interesting topic. I think also applies not only to Australia, because in Malaysia we are also facing the same problem. People are buying houses in a default design, which actually designing for 2 to 4 person, and then later on when they start to move, or some different between Australia in Malaysia is that sometimes the housing that they design is they need to expand. And from my experience, also when I was working in Yemen, in the Middle East, the way that they build the house is that it's half built. So it's go by stages. When they have the money, they to extend it. So normally they will extend higher. You can see houses with this concrete in columns, concrete frames, but it's not completed. So the same thing happens everywhere around the world, and your approach is very good. I think it should be implemented because one is that you don't waste more materials, and also well, I see that there's a problem in terms of aesthetic also. When in Chile, they have this, you already have a kind of a template, just fill in it, and then everybody have their own identity. So they start to create a lot of different facade. So, I mean, in terms of your findings, is that possible to control that part?
Yeah, so that's going to be part of the research, how to control the aesthetics or provide sort of some design review or opinion about that, because I know with the idea of building a new house is that people can look at the design and they know what to expect. But with this kind of a half house approach, it's unknown what the extensions will look like. So, but if we can think about maybe it's suggested in the building form, and there are some precedents of some case studies that I'll be looking at, like Next 21, where they had it's an apartment building in Osaka in Japan, and the architect who was responsible for the overall design had some different principles or guidelines of what cladding to use and what the window proportions should be, but the actual overall window sizes could be varied according to the internal fit out demands. So maybe in proposing a system where the extensions are added on, so that there's not just free fall of whatever can be added on. There's some stipulation about that the windows be in proportion to what has already been started with the starter house. Yeah, so it's definitely a concern that, yeah, it's a big question, because if I presented those the Chile example to Australian public, they go, no, I don't want to live in that kind of house, because it looks all, yeah, patched and brought together. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions? Lisa, if I may ask, how economic is the design of this adaptability house and this disassembly house design? How economic is,
economical?
yeah, is this
Yeah,
two?
all right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the main thrust of my argument for economy is that you're designing small to begin with, so you use less materials, and then you add on the extra rooms later. So it's something that I'll have to compare to the cost of the completed large building, and think about how the smaller size will start off lower. But it's also that the idea of the materials going beyond one life cycle, that they can be used again. So that's part of the question about or issue that I'll be tackling, is how to increase value of the materials of the products, that it's not defined by just the house on land and for that one life cycle. It is creating value in those materials.
Correct. If you have more some kind of calculations involved in your study, that will be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So any more questions? If there is none, then we thank Lisa for the interesting presentation.
Okay, thank
So
you.
much.
Thanks.
Okay, next we would like to welcome Mr. Mojtaba from Australia. Yeah. Hi. And his presentation topic is about the design typological analysis for urban water management, why quantification is needed and how it can be done. Okay, now the floor is yours, Mr. Mojtaba. Please, thanks. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, please kindly help to unmute Mojtaba's mic. Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can.
All right, thanks for the introduction. Let me share my screen. All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. So my presentation is about design typological analysis for urban water management. So essentially, I'm going to talk about the link between the water engineering and urban design. Let's look at the urban water management objectives. Like traditionally, the task for urban water engineers was to provide safe drinking water, handling wastewater for public health, and protecting residents against flooding. So the types of things that you could do with, adding more pipes underground. But more and more, we see that emerging objectives are being formulated in urban water management, recognizing water has a value and functions for recreation. Water is a local resource. Water is important for biodiversity. Aesthetic value of water is being recognized. And essentially, the issue of urban heat is being formulated as an urban water management problem, because when we reduce the moisture content in soil and on landscape, we end up with having urban heat problems. So essentially, if we can back those water on landscape, then we can fix that as well. Looking at the design process, so urban design starting from initial phase to the conceptual design and leading on to the design phase all the way to final design and site plan. If we look at that linear process and see where water engineers are actually contributing to the design, we see it's at the very end. So when the final design is created by urban designers, and then water engineers try to implement infrastructure to provide the needed water services. But recent studies are showing that the preliminary design is 3 times more influential on the local water cycle than the types of solution that water engineers would promote at the end of this process. So what's the alternative? We see in the literature that recently we see more conversation about collaborative urban planning and design, because if you look back at the emerging urban water objectives that I showed in the previous slides, then you can see those solutions require multiple disciplines to work together. You can't just put in more pipes into urban landscape and provide those services. So essentially, it becomes a conversation. It's a dialogue between professionals, architects, landscape architects, environmental engineers, energy planners, urban planners, and obviously water engineers. And at different steps through that circular dialogue, then we need to quantify the effect of alternatives, because when we put the urban design in the context of collaborative urban planning and urban design, then the issue is not that we don't have options. The issue is we have too many options, and we need to filter out those that they are more sustainable. So this is where design typological analysis come into the picture. Just want to elaborate on the design typology part, because it is a proxy of urban design heterogeneity across a number of water relevant parameters. You're talking about building types, things like detached houses versus townhouses, and they have different water performance. And within those building types, we have different variations. In this, on the right, you see 2 alternatives of the detached house, but one built previous to 2000 and one after 2000. And you can see the land cover is completely different, and you can imagine the urban hydrology can be very different. The urban planning is important because it gives us a spatial location of where these different design typologies can be actually built across the city. And on top of the urban fabric element, we have centralized and decentralized water servicing options that play a big importance in the water performance as well. And this all is framed in environmental conditions, climate and soil and so on. The social dimension is also important. What types of houses people want, because that drives the market, property market, but also local regulations, things like, can you implement gray water reuse? What types of end-use components gray water can be used on the site, and so on. So essentially, design typology analysis allows to diagnose the effects of urban design and planning on water systems in different environmental and social contexts. And it supports decision-making where multiple assessment criteria need to be compared. So there's a research gap on understanding strengths and weaknesses of different evaluation frameworks, quantitative models, and water performance indicators for design typological analysis. So the method that we did in this, we follow in this presentation is that we started with a systematic reviews of reviews. So we find review papers on the topic, and we're using keywords, and then we did the citation analysis to find more papers on the topic and remove the bias that might have been implemented because of the nature of searching papers by keywords. And then we identified key frameworks, and then we used that to create a generalized principle for design typological analysis, and then we implement that principles to a case study for green slopes in Brisbane. So literature review showed that there are 4 major frameworks that can be used for design typological analysis. We have urban water metabolism, which is basically looking at urban areas or cities as a metabolism. So they rely on supporting regions for resources and so on, and they extract resources from bioregions or supporting environment to provide certain functions. In case of cities, that could be livability. And through that process, they produce wastewater, low quality stormwater, greenhouse gas emission, and so on. So this is the principle. Another framework was economic evaluation, which is used to build a business case considering primary and secondary benefits of water-sensitive urban design. Then we have life cycle assessment, which can look at the material extraction all the way to the end of life cycle of building, and it's quite powerful for deciding on the choice of material and the construction processes. And then we have water neutrality framework, which was essentially looking at the current impact on the urban water cycle and ensure that the redevelopment or new development in the city, they do not worsen the current impact. Although these frameworks are quite different in terms of structure and aim, we could recognize that they have 4 steps in common. The first step is to define the system, define the component, scale, and scenarios. And then depending on the aim of the project, they require certain parameters. Usually it requires environmental parameters, information about built form, information about the water infrastructure or water servicing, social demographics. If it's about climate change adaptation, climate change scenarios are important. And finally, monetary values. So this information goes into a quantification method to be able to quantify water performance or quantify urban water flows. But it also can be extended to other aspects relevant to urban design, things like architectural and urban space quality, water-related livability, urban heat, energy, water quality, and economics. Then the water performance or urban water flows, then the next step is to use that to create water performance indicators. And then with that indicator, those indicators can feed into multi-criteria decision-making process. So looking at the quantification models for urban water management, we recognize that there are 3 different type of models. The first one is urban drainage models, which basically try to model the urban drainage infrastructure and urban rainfall runoff processes. And then we have urban water mass balance models, which in addition to rainfall runoff processes, they have water demand element in them. So essentially what they do is that they put a 3-dimensional system boundary around the urban area in question. And when they do that, they can account for all inflows and outflows from that, to and from that system. Direct flows, things like precipitation, extraction from water mains. If you have decentralized system extracting water from local groundwater, that could be another inflow. And outflows could be evapotranspiration, water leaving the system as vapor, stormwater runoff, wastewater, and infiltration. And when you have that system, it becomes quite powerful because no matter what types of interventions you are testing, you can see the impact on one or multiple of these urban water flows. Let's say people decide to take shorter shower, or urban designers design the city in different ways hence they change the land cover in different ways, and then that would change the hydrology of the system. Or technologies, if water engineers decide to implement stormwater harvesting systems in the site, and that would impact the urban water mass balance. So as you can see, no matter what types of interventions that we are looking at, we have one specific framework that can be applied for multidisciplinary analysis. And then we have integrated urban water system models, with essentially looking at the entire urban water system, from extraction, water supply, water distribution, demand, wastewater collection, stormwater collection, and treatment at the end, all the way to the receiving water bodies. In addition to that, they can be linked to different disciplines, urban development modules, climate change modules, societal modules, and so on. They're quite complex, and they're probably not as useful for preliminary urban design, but they can be very useful for later on when we get closer to the final design. And then the literature on water performance indicators is quite big. So as you can see, this is an example of the list of the type of indicators that often is being used. But essentially, we can group them into 4 groups: those that they aim to categorize resources efficiency, those that for supply internalization. We have protection and restoration of hydrological flows, things like stormwater naturalness, which I'm going to talk about in the next slides, and those indicators that they recognize the diverse functionality of water in the landscape. All right, so moving on to the case study. So we follow the generalized principle that we recognize from the literature. The first step was to define the recent redevelopment trends in our case study using satellite images and social demographic data. Then we matched that with different water technology scenarios. Here we have a base case, essentially not implementing any decentralized technologies. A scenario is efficient appliances, EA, a rainwater harvesting tank, and the last scenario is a combination of both. We put this into the environmental condition of Brisbane. We used the time series data of precipitation and potential evapotranspiration from 2000 to 2015. And those input went to site-scale urban water mass balance assessment model to estimate urban water flows. And with those flows and social demographic information, we can calculate water performance indicators, which we calculated 3 to just show an example of how it can be used. We have water use intensity, which is basically water source from the bioregions divided by number of people. We have supply internalization, and we got stormwater neutral index, which is essentially looking at stormwater runoff after development and compared with the existing case. The case study is in green slopes. It has a 9,000 population at the moment, which gives a residential density of 33 persons per hectare, but it is projected that in 2051, the population will grow to 16,000, and that would be a density of 55 persons per hectare. Major new development will occur as subdivision under current urban planning regulation. And this is something that we see not only in Greenslope, but in other suburbs around Brisbane as well. How they look like, as you can see in this figure, we have a typical land parcel, which is 20 to 40 meters, and often they get subdivided side by side, something that I call vertical subdivision, to form 2 10 to 40 development areas. And as you can see, the social demographics and some information on the parcel, and obviously land cover. We have larger roof areas, we have larger impervious areas, pavement and driveways and so on, and we lose a lot of vegetation, short and tall vegetation, simply because we don't have area to be able to plant deep root vegetation. So in terms of scenario, I already talked about different technologies. So here in this slide, you see some specifications of how those technologies actually implemented in the model. And so the water performance indicators, what we find is that currently the water use intensity in the site is 250 liter per person per day. With subdivision, that would reduce to 158. And the reason is mostly because of the loss of garden area, so the loss of outdoor demand for irrigation, and also because more the number of people in the site increases. If we apply efficient appliances, we can further decrease water use intensity to 130, and if we apply rainwater tank, even reduction even further to 113, and the combination of the both, we can have a significant reduction to 96 liter per person per day. In terms of supply internalization, with rainwater tank, we can meet between 25 to 24% of total water demand on the site, from the site. But that comes with a catch, because with all the reduction in green spaces and roof and impervious surfaces replacement, then we have more stormwater. So comparing existing case, which is 100%, to after redevelopment subdivision, we see that stormwater increases by 265%. With rainwater tank, we can reduce that a little bit, around 50% to 215, but still that's a huge increase in stormwater runoff. So if you want to look at this type of design typological analysis for urban water management and how they can be useful in real life, the first use implication is for sustainable urban water manmanagement. Here we show that quantification of development.
Mr. Mojtaba,
Sorry.
Could you please go to the last slide, and yeah, the time is limited. Thanks.
Yeah. I thought it's 20 minutes. Sorry, I planned for 20 minutes presentation.
The presentation is 15 minutes and Q&A is 5 minutes.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry. So
Okay.
I'm just gonna conclude then. Thanks for the heads up. So we saw that evidence of performance is needed for compare, rank, and define and choose sustainable options. And our critical review shows that urban water mass balance models are useful for design topological analysis. And the case study gave us a baseline for architects, urban designers, and planners, and water engineers to create sustainable alternative for subdivision scenario here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry again, Mr. Mojtaba, to disturb this presentation.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. I thought
Your-
it's 20 minutes. I planned for 20 minutes presentation. That's why I was.
Yeah. Your paper is very comprehensive. Well done, I think. It's one of the paper I've seen in this seminar. Very good.
Thanks.
Yeah. So any questions from the floor, please? Or if I may ask, because Mr. Mojtaba, I think that your framework is quite big. It's involving the drinking water, the wastewater,
Yeah.
and even tackling the flood issue. Okay, so could it be the framework that you form? How to tackle each part of the issue? I think have you explained somewhere? I mean, for the design for tackling the flood, design for tackling the wastewater. Yeah, if there is, please enlighten me. Thanks.
Yes, so I agree that it aims to bring together all aspects of urban water mass balance. It's quite complicated in that way. It was a question in the beginning of the research that do we need to bring those elements together or not? And our preliminary result shows that there are trade-offs. So as you can see in this example, I only focus on stormwater and imported water. But if you add in evapotranspiration, which is essentially a proxy for urban heat, then you can see you can increase density, but that usually comes with a cost, either with increase of imported water or increase in stormwater discharge and increase in urban heat risk. So then the question was, or what can we do to reduce those impacts? And when you reduce those impacts, you can say, I want to have more green spaces. Fair enough. You're gonna solve urban heat problem. You're gonna solve stormwater issue, but then you're gonna increase imported water even more, because you need to irrigate it to be able to have it functional. So as you can see, those trade-offs are becoming important. So that's why we decided to put everything together, and instead of looking at for flood and drought separately, look at it all together to see if we can find a solution that can meet multiple different challenges that we had in urban design.
Is there any preliminary finding that applying your concept?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so there are 2 papers published on this concept, working on Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth, so 3 cities around Australia. And depending on the environmental conditions, I don't think we have enough time to, so I can't probably go into detail. But what we found is that in addition to the urban design element and water technology element, depending on where you are and which city you are, the types of solutions might be different as well. One example for Perth was quite interesting. So I can send in those papers if you're more interested to read about this concept.
Yeah, please share on the chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. I like your paper because you're integrating the technology in the city. It could be a topic for smart city development because I'm in this topic.
Yeah.
Okay. So any more questions from the floor? Okay, if there is none, we thank you, Mr. Mochsava, for the interesting presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now let's welcome our last presenter from Queensland, Australia, Dr. Paul Matthew. Okay, and the presentation title is Life Cycle Analysis of Building Materials as a Tool in Decision Making for Urban Redevelopment. So the floor is yours, Dr. Paul. Please.
Excellent. Thank you for unmuting me. I'm just go through. I'm not quite sure how I can share my screen. It's not giving me a. I think I might have the same problem that Lisa had, in that I can't seem to share. So if you just give me 2 minutes, I'll move to the Paola's room and present from there. I'm sorry about this.
It's okay. You mean you can't share the slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
And okay. Excellent. And it seems like I'm on now. Okay, very good. Apologies for the technical issues there. So I'd just like to quickly talk through results that have come out of a PhD project I've undertaken with Dr. Paola Liadini in the UQ School of Architecture, and sort of its implications for what will happen with Mo's research project in Greenslope. So a quick bit about me. My background is I've been a practicing architect since the early 2000s. In about 2015, I returned to UQ to do a PhD focusing on older apartment buildings. And since then, I'm furthering that research, delving deeper into life cycle assessment of apartment buildings and of urban redevelopment more generally. So in the broad context of things, we're looking at a increase in global population, where we'll add another 2 billion people, more or less, between now and 2050. And it's highly likely most of those people we're going to add globally are going to be urban residents rather than the traditional split of largely rural people. And you know, this graph really clearly shows that both the dramatic increase in population and rural population declining as a percentage of overall global population. Clearly, this isn't uniformly distributed around the world. So this is an idea of roughly the rates of different urbanization throughout the world. And we can see, say, places like Japan and like Argentina, highly urbanized. And other places, most notably sort of the subcontinental area and Central Africa, much less densely populated. This is expected to increase everywhere by 2050. And we can see globally, almost all countries are moving 10 or 20% more towards urban population rather than sort of urban rural populations. Looking a bit closer at our area, this is the current situation. And by 2050, we can see all the countries in our area are becoming increasingly urbanized. Now, increasing urbanization, it's going to lead to a variety of both positive and negative effects. In negative terms, there's a dramatic loss of social connectedness as people's networks are disrupted, they lose access to services, we have sort of overcrowding, we have the loss of urban green space, and increasingly, certainly in Australia, we have development being pushed onto more and more marginal land, which is more subject to flooding, to cyclones, to storm damage. And so we're sort of going to see, as particularly as the climate changes as well, we're going to see more and more urban habitat that's at risk of natural disasters. Okay, and so what we need to, well, we can use life cycle analysis as a way to sort of help manage the impacts of the built environment on the natural environment. And so one of the key approach, sort of a quick primer on life cycle analysis is we're used to dealing with the operational impacts of buildings. It's quite common to measure the amount of electricity used for heating and cooling buildings, the consumption of water, the energy used for lighting and appliances and plug loads. It's becoming more common now to sort of think about the embodied impacts of construction. So that's the impacts on the environment caused by the extraction and refining of resources, by manufacturing those into building products, transporting them to construction sites, the assembly of those elements into a building, and then of course the ongoing maintenance of those things throughout the lifespan of a building. So particularly in Australia, we use energy as a proxy for overall environmental impacts because we depend heavily on fossil fuels for electricity generation. This isn't the case everywhere. New Zealand is a good counterexample of a country with a very high proportion of renewable energy generation from geothermal and from hydroelectric systems. And so energy isn't necessarily a great proxy for them, but it's particularly good for us in Australia and for quite a few places in Southeast Asia. So we often talk in terms of operational energy and embodied energy when we're sort of more or less referring to the impacts, operational impacts and embodied impacts. We also like to make a split between the initial embodied energy, the energy or the impacts that are associated with the initial construction of the building, and the recurrent embodied impacts, which are due to the ongoing maintenance, the replacement of components, whether that's carpets, desks, furniture, light fittings, as sort of a building gets progressively upgraded through its lifespan. Now, life cycle assessment is quite specific to the electricity sources in a country and in an area, and so often there's no easily extrapolatable general results. It makes more sense to talk about the results of life cycle analysis for a particular building type and place. So because my research is based in Brisbane, I can just give you a quick overview of Brisbane's built environment. And this will also link back to Mo's work on green slopes, and we can sort of talk further about how those two projects are related. So Brisbane is I think the third or fourth largest city in Australia. You can see we're sort of midway along the east coast. We've had a rapidly growing population since 1950 or 1960. You can see population was very, very small and low up until essentially 1945. We're on track to hit 3 million population by 2030. And by 2050, it's expected Brisbane will merge with the Gold Coast immediately to our south and the Sunshine Coast immediately to our north. And there might be a total of 6 million people in this sort of massive conurbation that's, 250 kilometres from south to north. While Brisbane was a small town, it was very much a city of detached timber and tin housing, as Lisa referred to earlier. But in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, we saw a lot of redevelopment of urban sites. So timber and tin houses would be relocated or demolished and replaced with concrete and brick apartment buildings of varying size, ranging from quite small, 4 or 6 apartment units up through to sort of 10 or 20-story multi-residential buildings. In the 1990s, due to the impact of that urban regeneration, a demolition control was put in place to stop the loss of these traditional houses. It was basically felt that the neighbourhoods were losing their character, and this sort of forced development to the periphery of the city. So from the 2000s onwards, we've had another massive residential boom, but this time focused on the redevelopment of brownfield sites as large mixed-use buildings. So here we can see something from inner city Brisbane. There's the remains of a gasometer, a gas storage facility in the foreground, and where what used to be sort of industrial wasteland is now high-density residential. At the same time, we're sort of seeing stagnation in the development of the suburbs. In some cases, has led to a good preservation of a traditional streetscape that we can see on the left. And at the same time, it does result in some perverse outcomes where what used to be high quality timber housing is now being sort of left to rot and decay because the owners aren't able to develop it in a way that they think is profitable. And this also means that the remaining stock of smaller non-character protected houses that are not protected by those demolition controls, are under increasing pressure. And so here we can see this is a 1950s small apartment building that's now surrounded by 15-story residential immediately behind it and 5 to 6-story residential immediately adjacent to it. So the buildings I've been studying are the developments from the 60s and 70s. I'm going to sort of zoom in now and talk about the impact of these buildings on the environment. But in order to sort of, well, because life cycle analysis is quite a complex process, it's worth making sure that if you're going to go through that sort of process, you can apply the results to a wide variety of individual buildings. So as a part of my study, I've identified all of the older apartment towers within Brisbane that have more than 4 stories which are lift accessible, and generally found they're located within 4 kilometres of the city centre. And then through doing a series of site visits, I've identified, I'll step through their rough geographical distribution. You can sort of see that throughout, at 5-year intervals, there's a strong peak in the number of construction of buildings in the mid-70s before that sort of tailed off into the 80s. In the course of visiting these buildings, I've sort of assessed a number of common characteristics, including their height. Most are in this sort of medium rise, 4 to 9 story sort of zone, relatively few are larger. Almost all of them are entirely residential, which contrasts strongly to more recent redevelopment, which tends to be mixed use and have some retail and some office space as well as residential space. Nearly all of, well, there's a fair few that have square or rectangular plan shapes, although there's a range of other plan shapes that briefly were fashionable, including L shapes and O shapes and H shapes. Pretty much all of them are masonry wall construction. Most of them bricks, a very small number are in situ concrete or concrete block work. Nearly all of them have a low-pitched metal sheet roof rather than a concrete roof. And then overall, sort of looking at the range of characteristics, we identified a total of 19. We found that this group of buildings is extremely similar. So 50% of buildings have at least 16 characteristics, and 70% of these buildings have 14 of the 19 characteristics. And so what we can sort of do with a life cycle assessment is we can find one of these buildings that has most of the common characteristics, do a detailed life cycle analysis on that, and then extrapolate the results of that to these larger group of buildings that we now know share a large number of similar characteristics. And so this is an example of a very typical building of my cohort. It's got the rectangular plan, the right height, the right number of units per floor, the right materials, the right relationship of site cover, of building area to site area, and a range of other factors as well. As a part of this, we've also used a physical lifespan estimation tool developed by Dr. Craig Langston at Bond University, and it assesses a group of 30 factors in order to sort of work out an estimate of a physical lifespan that might range from 25 years in the case of a poorly constructed building on flood-prone land or earthquake-prone land, up to a very well-constructed, high-quality building on stable soils. And what we've found is that the range on this building is some won't live very long. There's three that only have a 100-year expected lifespan, but the average is around 175 years. So we can also feed that into our life cycle analysis in order to understand the overall impacts of these buildings on the environment, and also which parts of these buildings and which part of the building life cycle has the most impact. So I think we're now going to sort of look at, I'll quickly describe the case study building so you can get an idea of what we're talking about. It's on the Brisbane River, so the image on the left faces towards the city and the river and to north. The image on the right faces back towards the street. We can see it's a 9-story building, which includes a small sort of basement for car parking. And then there's 2 units per floor. They're quite generous. They're 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a separate toilet and laundry. So they're certainly sort of large and comfortable, as well as having sort of extensive living, outdoor living areas that face to the north, to the east, to the west, and sort of to the southeast and southwest. So looking at the results of our study, first we sort of calculated the quantities of materials involved and then applied embodied energy rates to them, and then added the sort of the totals up to understand the relative impact of each material in the initial construction of the building. And what this graph shows us is it's clear that the reinforced concrete frame and brick external walls of the building, they compose just over 50% of the total initial impact of the building. The blue and the sort of the brown tones here represent the external building envelope, so things like windows and doors and sunshades, roof sheet, things like that. And the warmer tones sort of indicating the interior fit outs, sort of that each of those is a roughly equal proportion of what's left. Following on from Lisa's use of the shearing layers developed by Brandon Duffy, I've sort of generalized these into the structure of the building, the skin of the building, and the space plan, which representing the interior fittings and finishes. Now, I've added to this, on top of this initial embodied energy, I've added the recurrent embodied energy of replacing elements. So replacing windows every 50 years and replacing apartment interiors, roof sheets, painting the building internally. And we can see that the amount of recurrent embodied energy progressively increases across the building's lifespan. It quite quickly, so at the moment in 2023, this recurrent embodied energy is just over 50% of the initial embodied energy of the building. But by the time we get out to sort of 2063, we'll have added a much environmental impact to the building through refurbishment as was in the original construction of the building. And should this building live its full 200 years, the total impact of all those repairs and all that amending and modifying will be significantly larger than the initial embodied impact of the building. So working backwards now, I'm sort of going to split those into the structure and the skin and the space plan. And from here we can see, because of the nature of the structure of these buildings, that embodied energy doesn't change. So the cavity brick external walls and the concrete slab floors don't require any maintenance. The initial embodied energy that goes into them maintains through the whole life of the building. The skin layer, including doors, windows, roofs, that kind of thing, we can sort of see that does progressively step up. Around every 50 years, there's another sort of substantial jump in the amount of energy that's added to the building. But the real thing here is the space plan. This clearly shows that it's the renovation of apartment interiors, which is having the biggest overall impact of these buildings on the environment. And then breaking that down even further, we can sort of see much more clearly that it's spread more or less equally across sanitary ware, replacement of cabinet work in bathrooms and laundries and kitchens. There's a relatively small element of painting, tiles, things like that. And hot water systems also play some role, but not too dramatic a role. So this is really giving us a clear idea that these kind of buildings, they're essentially a stable and relatively low energy shell that's housing a quite energy intensive set of habitation sort of rituals and practices. What's also interesting though is when we sort of think about things in a slightly different way. So these graphs are tallying the total energy that's added to the building year on year on year, finding a final figure in gigajoules. Another way to look at that is to think about the total amount of energy that's in the building divided by the number of years it's been occupied for. And that shows us that over the life of the building, the ongoing cost of that building dramatically reduces, and particularly so in the first sort of 50 or 60 years of that building's life. Here we can see at the left of the building, we have the initial embodied energy isn't overspread over very many years, but as it's increasingly spread through the life of the building, it becomes an almost significant portion of the overall environmental impact. Now, what we can learn from this, sorry, I'll quickly sort of finish up here. So to summarize the impact of this for the buildings I'm looking at is if we're thinking about replacing one of these buildings to redevelop its site now, and we want to result in a lower embodied energy or a lower environmental cost, then we need to replace this building for less than this amount of embodied energy, which is an extremely difficult task, where we would essentially be building with probably 30% of the embodied energy of the original construction. So this is a strong argument for attention of these older apartment towers until we can develop significantly lower impact construction methods. Now, the wider impact of this is the embodied energy, the rate of increase in embodied energy for these buildings is not particularly high. It's actually below what's estimated to be average for the built environment in general. So this relationship between initial and recurrent embodied energy over lifespan is going to be fairly typical for most buildings. And that in turn means we should be thinking strongly about how much of our built environment we can conserve until we develop far lower impact construction methods. And in turn, this can assist us to maintain local history, customs and ties that are embedded in our built environment, and hopefully can stop us losing green space and from pushing development into ever more environmentally fragile areas. So I think, of course, there's some important caveats to this work, and one of them is that we've excluded the occupational impact of living in the building. That clearly has another sort of significant layer to add on top of it. And it also depends heavily on the source of the energy being used, both for the embodied impact and for the operational energy use. I'm still sort of developing research and publications on that, and I hope to have more to say about that in the near future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Paul, for the interesting presentation. Right. We welcome questions from the floor, please. All right, Dr. Paul, if I may ask.
Sure.
I kind of can understand the meaning of life cycle. If when the cycle is coming to the end, meaning that the energy, the building and the energy embodied energy per year is going to reduce or increase. I mean, then how does it influence the decision making? To abolish the building or what? Please kindly explain it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what those graphs generally show is that the longer we can keep a building running, the lower its overall cost is per year of operation. And so we need to be very careful about demolishing buildings, because inevitably the amount of initial embodied energy of a new building will be, it's almost certain to be larger than the impact of the, the ongoing impact of the building that we're adding in its place. So this kind of argues for sort of careful, detailed study and the identification of buildings that are particularly high maintenance, because we know as the building ages, that recurrent embodied energy adds and adds and adds, and we need to identify sort of the worst offenders there and sort of replace those first. So we sort of, rather than a wholesale just demolish everything, let's build a new building, we should sort of aim to be as targeted as we can and find, a good example would be a comparison would be, say, with cars and motorbikes, where rather than replacing a car that's been built 5 years ago that's still relatively energy efficient, we should be targeting the significantly older vehicles with larger engines and lower fuel standards, because they're creating the greatest amount of pollution. I think we sort of need to have a similarly targeted response with our built environment.
I see. I think that is very interesting, contributing to the conserving some kind of a historical building in Australia. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
Right,
and
thank you.
There's a question from Lisa, and I think you have answered the question.
Oh.
Yeah, would you like to add some more, Dr. Paul, on the questions from Lisa?
Let me just have a look at that. Is that in the chat? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's under questions. Oh, no, I can't see through. Oh, sorry, I'm in chat. Okay. Oh, right, I see. Sorry, I'm not familiar with this.
Webex.
Oh, yeah.
What was here, but you already answered it.
Oh, okay. Development. Sorry. Have you developed any insight about the overall renovations versus new highly efficient construction for environmental benefits? I haven't really sort of delved into a comparison of existing older building versus new highly energy efficient buildings, but that's one of the things that we'll be working on for the Green Slopes redevelopment project that Moshtaba was speaking about earlier. So while he's working on the management of water at an urban level, I'll be examining the life cycle implications of the existing and proposed buildings.
That would be a great team.
Yes.
Okay, congratulations on your teamwork. And yeah. Is there any more questions? Because yeah, over time already. So if there is none, I thank all presenters for sharing with us your research. Very interesting. And I would like to invite all to on your camera, and we have a photo session together.
Okay, would you like to come?
Yeah, please kindly on the camera.
Paola and Lisa can join us.
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yes. Okay, another one.
3 star.
Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, done.
Okay, thank you, Azazi. Thank you so much from
Excellent.
Australia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paula, Paul, and Lisa. Okay, and participants from Indonesia and Malaysia. So we end the session here. If you'd like to join the closing ceremony, please click the link on the chat box. So that's all. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.